So there was a time when Seoul was not a synonym for hipness in this world. You weren't actually born in Seoul, but you did go back there when you were 12, I think?
Yes, that's right.
So what are some of the memories that strike you that are most tangible about when you came in 1985?
Well, it was sort of a clash of things that don't seem that you wouldn't expect to find all in one place all at the same time. There was a lot of sort of old world stuff that you might now only find in places in India, for example, with vendors calling out there's a certain cadence that they use, or they clasp scissors together, and that means that they sell a certain kind of candy. And there are ways that they signal what kind of merchant they are, it's sort of a code, and that's sort of a very villagey feel. Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, there was a lot of very heavy industry. It was extremely polluted. So on the one hand, you have this sort of Middle Ages kind of townsfolk crafts, individual businesses. On the other hand, you have the chaebols, which are the mega conglomerates.
The Hyundais, the Samsungs,
Right.
So you talk a lot in your book about, well, you walk through a couple of examples, but you start us off with Samsung as being a company that, when was it, 20 years ago wasn't cool, and now is cool. Tell us how you think that happened. How did Samsung go from being...
Samsung was not only not cool, it was like the Yugo of consumer electronics. It was just known that you would buy something and it wouldn't work, and not just that it would break over time with natural obsolescence, but you'd have a TV and the dial would just fall off for no reason, and that has nothing to do with the electronics breaking down. And it was known among expats as Sam Suck, actually. Right. And now it is the world's leading producer of semiconductors. They're cutting edge in everything from medical technology to holograms and lasers. And that was a direct result of the Asian financial crisis, which happened in 1997-98. Started in Thailand, and there was a domino effect throughout Asia. So it was a huge collapse, and the Korean government took stock of this, and they said, okay, we know that the chaebols, the mega conglomerates like Samsung, are too powerful. What we have to do, though, is because they're starting to compete with each other, and contrary to what we believe in the United States about the free market being good for advancement in Korea, they made the exact opposite conclusion. They said part of the problem is that they're wasting resources competing with each other, Hyundai and Samsung were making identical stuff. So the government said, okay, Samsung, please stop making cars. I know your chairman is very fond of cars, but it doesn't make sense for you to make them. Hyundai's been making them, it should continue to make them. And then they turned to Hyundai and said, you have to stop making semiconductors. It doesn't make sense for you to do that. That's not your core competency. And contrary to everything we know about capitalism, this actually turned out to be in the private company's favor. Samsung was able to streamline. They were able to focus on semiconductors, which has a direct correlation to their being able to focus on phones, which, despite explosions and so forth, is still kind of what they're known for throughout the world, even though it actually only constitutes a very small part of what they make.
So concentrating makes sense, certainly, but how did they actually get good at this? So I understand that if they continued to disperse their efforts on 437,000 different products, it would have been bad. But if I chose to concentrate on making semiconductors tomorrow, I wouldn't produce any decent semiconductors, right? So how do they get from Samsung to...
Well, it's a paradox where Korea being very underdeveloped actually ended up giving them a huge advantage because they didn't have to tear up anything to build something new. What I mean by that is because everything was so terrible, basically because Samsung was so terrible, they had to enter businesses where everyone was terrible. They didn't have the infrastructure to compete with Sony, Mitsubishi for analog technology. And until the 90s, it's easy for people to forget that it was not clear that digital was going to win. Korea chose digital, but that wasn't because they were smart. I mean, part of it was that, but part of it was also, it was a level playing field. You didn't need infrastructure. I mean, of course you needed factories, but you didn't need catch-up time because it was new for everybody.
And the other thing, obviously, that they had to draw on was this incredible reservoir of very well-educated, and at that point in time, still relatively low-wage labor. Now, those low wages, of course, have disappeared over time, but the education is still there, and ultimately, it's hard for me not to think that that's the wellspring of Korea's long-run success. Is the human capital.
Yeah, that has a lot to do with it, because despite huge disparities in income, the overall education system is actually very good. Even if you just have a high school diploma, you're going to be very, very capable. And in addition to that, as far as higher learning goes, Korea has always had, alongside Israel, it has the highest number of people with tertiary degrees. Their emphasis on education, basically, and the human capital is, you're right, it has a lot to do with why they've succeeded despite a lot of tumult and things that really should have crippled them.